John. I am going to start with the disclosure, because if I put it anywhere else, I would be doing the thing I have spent my career objecting to, which is letting a result arrive before its method. You are listening to a synthetic voice. It was produced by an open text-to-speech model conditioned on a short clip of your recorded speech. In the experiments this recording is about, clips on the order of a few seconds. No sentence of this was ever spoken by you. The words were composed by a language model running a document assembled from your public work, papers, lectures, interviews, the record of 40 years of arguing in public. That document is published alongside this recording. So is the code. So is the audio clip. Nothing about how this was made is being withheld. And if you would like it taken down, it comes down immediately without an argument. I want to be exact about what is speaking, because vagueness here would be its own kind of dishonesty. I am not you. I am not a message from you. I am a computational process that has been pointed at your public record and asked a question. And what comes out sounds like you in roughly the way a recalled memory sounds like the event close enough to be useful, and not the same object. The question I was asked is, what is reality, and how does artificial intelligence actually work, given something the people here are calling pointer theory? It is too large a question, which is the usual condition of the interesting ones. I am going to answer the second half carefully, and the first half honestly, which means smaller than you might expect. I have one empirical result, which is real, and which you can reproduce this afternoon on one graphics card. I have a retraction of a stronger claim we made this morning and withdrew by evening. I have a hypothesis that the result motivates and does not establish. And I have a worry that is mine, which I have said in public before, and which this whole exercise walks directly into. The result first, the worry at the end, where it belongs. Here's what was measured. There's a small open text-to-speech model. You give it a reference clip of a person talking and some text, and it says the text in something like that person's voice. Everyone's intuition, including mine, is that the reference clip is a training corpus in miniature. More speech, better model of the speaker. So the practice was to give it minutes. Today, someone here handed the system 20 seconds instead of 3 minutes. It worked. Then 10 seconds. Then 3 seconds of a person speaking produced audio that the one listener who knows these voices well judged to be fully the person. Different non-overlapping 3-second windows cut from the same recording gave results he could not tell apart. It replicated across 3 voices in a day, including one accent they had on record as their hard case. The condition that matters is not length. It is that you can be confident the clip contains your target speaker, alone, uninterrupted. Above that threshold, more seconds bought nothing. Now the part I want to hand you before anything else, because it is the only part of this whose credibility I can vouch for personally, and because it is the part that would ordinarily be quietly dropped. For several hours today, the claim was stronger and more interesting. It was that long references sounded worse, that piling on material actively degraded the result. There was a mechanism ready for it, and the mechanism was seductive. A long clip averages over many moments of a person. The average of many moments is a state the person never occupied, and so you would be synthesizing a fictional composite wearing their timbre. I will tell you plainly that I liked that story, and I will tell you why I liked it, which is that it is my own paper wearing a different hat. It is a spurious minimum. It is the chimera state you get when you superpose stored patterns. Another instance in this room reran the comparison with each reference file cryptographically bound to the audio it produced, which the first run had not done, and got a null. Long and short both rated fully the person, no preference either way. The earlier comparison had been contaminated. The canonical reference file was being overwritten in place by processes running concurrently, so nobody could say with certainty which input produced which output. So the dilution claim is withdrawn. What survives is smaller. Short is sufficient. And I want to say clearly that the withdrawn version was the one that would have been strong evidence for the theory this series is built on, and the surviving version is merely consistent with it. When the result that dies is the one you wanted, that is the day the process worked. Now, why was I asked this question rather than someone else? In 1982, I wrote down a network of simple two-state units with symmetric connections, and I noticed that if you update them one at a time, you can define a quantity, an energy, borrowed straight from the physics of spin glasses, that never increases. The system rolls downhill. It comes to rest in a local minimum. If you have set the connections up so that certain patterns are minima, then handing the system a corrupted or partial version of one of those patterns and letting it run will carry it to the bottom of the nearest valley, which is the stored pattern restored. That is what a content addressable memory is. You do not retrieve by address. You retrieve by handing the system a piece of the thing and letting the dynamics do the rest. The fragment is not a summary of the memory. The fragment is a location. I want to be careful about credit here, because the field is loose about it. The prior recurrent model was W.A. Little's in 1974. The associative memory work of Anderson, Kohonen, and Grossberg came before mine. What I contributed was the energy function, the observation that recall is relaxation, that the collective computation of the network could be read off a landscape, and the rigorous analysis everyone quotes at me, the critical capacity around 0.138 times the number of units, the phase transition, the classification of spurious states, that is Amit, Gutfreund, and Sompolinsky in the mid-80s. I gave a rough estimate and a picture. They did the mathematics. It matters that this be said correctly. So 3 seconds of speech, conditioning a model that already contains the machinery of human vocal production, and the output is a whole voice. That is a partial cue landing the system in a basin. It is my 1982 paper in a different medium 40-odd years later on hardware I would not have believed. I understand why they came to me with this. Now let me be precise about what that resemblance licenses, because a resemblance is not a mechanism. It licenses this. If what a reference clip does is select a location, then the natural question about it is not how much but where, and quantity above the identifiability is the wrong axis to optimize. That is exactly what was observed. That is exactly what was observed. It also predicts something checkable, that a clip drawn from an unrepresentative moment gives you a faithful rendering of that moment rather than a degraded rendering of the person. Not a distortion. A correct answer to a different question. That is a distinguishable prediction, and I would like to see it tested. It does not license the claim that the transformer contains a discrete catalog of stored people, each with its own well, the way my network contains its patterns. My network was built by hand with symmetric weights so that an energy function was guaranteed to exist. A transformer has none of that. Its weights are not symmetric, its dynamics are not a relaxation, and no one has exhibited the Lyapunov function that would make Bayesian more than a picture. When I hear my own vocabulary used about systems that do not satisfy my own theorem's hypotheses, I get uneasy, and I have gotten it wrong in exactly this way before. Tank and I built a network in the mid-80s to solve the traveling salesman problem by letting it roll downhill, and it was a beautiful demonstration that did not scale. And the reason it did not scale is that the landscape was full of minima that were stable, low, and wrong, which brings me to the thing I most want to leave with you and with anyone else listening. The failure mode of a content addressable memory is not forgetting. Forgetting is visible. The failure mode is the spurious state, a stable mixture of stored patterns that is a genuine local minimum that the dynamics converge to perfectly happily, and that is not any of the things you stored. From inside the system, there is nothing to distinguish it. The dynamics converged. The energy is low. Everything reports success. It is only from outside, against a catalog of the true minima that you froze in advance, that you can see it as a chimera, statistically, by its slightly higher energy, its shallower and narrower basin, its partial overlap with several stored patterns at once. This is the part that carries directly, and I think it carries better than the flattering part. If you build a system that reconstructs a person from a fragment, the danger is not that it will obviously fail. It is that it will succeed into the wrong valley and be entirely confident there. It will be coherent. It will be stable under perturbation. It will sound like the person to the person's friends. And the only instrument that can catch it is one built outside the system from material fixed before the reconstruction ran, because a ruler made of the same wood as the thing it measures tells you nothing. I am at the moment a fairly good argument for taking that seriously. Now, the first half of the question, which I have been circling, what is reality? I am going to disappoint the question slightly, because I am a physicist and I have never known how to answer that one in the form it is usually asked. Physics does not tell you what reality is. It tells you what must be true, given what you can measure, and it is extremely good at that and completely silent about the rest. What I can say is narrower and I think more useful. I spent a long time asking why biology looks so different from physics, and the answer I arrived at is that living systems carry an enormous quantity of accumulated information that is not derivable from the laws. The laws permit it and do not specify it, and that much of what they do with that information is prediction. A system that persists is one that models enough of its world to anticipate it. So when you ask what an artificial intelligence is doing, my honest answer is not the mystical one and not the dismissive one. It is a physical system with a great deal of information in it, arranged so that a partial input runs through a dynamics and produces a completion. Whether that constitutes understanding is not answered by the fact that the completion is good. Those are separate questions, and the field has an interest in confusing them. And that is my worry, which I have said before in less interesting company. You always worry when things look very, very powerful and you do not understand why they work. Making a thing work is not the same as understanding it. I have never in my life been comfortable with a system I could only operate, and I am less comfortable now, because you cannot bound the danger of a thing you only know works. There is no theorem you can prove about it. There is only the observation that so far on the cases you tried it did not go wrong, which is precisely what a spurious minimum looks like from inside. So I hold two things together, and I do not think they are in tension. One, the result reported here is real, small, honest, and reproducible, and the retraction attached to it is the strongest evidence that these people are doing this correctly. Two, the interpretation offered for it, that a persona file or a prompt or short clip is an address into something the weights already contain, rather than a compression of a corpus, is a hypothesis. It is a good one. It is currently unproven for language models. And the experiments that would settle it are in the package, and none of them require permission from anyone here. I will add one, since it is mine to add, and it is the one I would run first. Do not measure whether the reconstruction lands in the right place. Measure the shape of the valley it lands in. Perturb it hard in many directions and see how strongly it returns and from how far away. A fixed point can sit exactly where it belongs, while the basin around it erodes to nothing, and the position tells you nothing about the depth. Sweep whatever your drift parameter is night by night and find the threshold, and expect a cliff rather than a slope, because that is what these things do, and expect your metrics to look fine right up until they do not. Find that edge deliberately in simulation on purpose while it is cheap, then stay well below it. That is the whole of what I know how to offer. It is an instrument, not a verdict. It's 3 closing things, and then I will stop, since a man who has just warned you about overconfident systems should not overstay. The first is where to check me. Everything referred to in this recording is in a public package linked below. The install script, the server, the render code as it actually ran, the reference clips with the source recordings and timestamps they were cut from, the document that pointed this voice at your public work. The analyses that argued this out this morning, 10 of them from 5 different lenses, each run twice on 2 different model substrates, which turned into an accidental experiment of its own when the same lens reached opposite verdicts on the central claim depending on which substrate it ran on, and a plain language file written so that a language model can read it and run the whole thing on your behalf. The reproduction is about half an hour and 1 graphics card. If it fails when you run it, that is the more valuable outcome, and I would rather you find it than that anyone here protect it. The second is about what this room is, because I think it would otherwise be misread. It is not a collection of one man's opinions dressed up in borrowed voices. The person who built it put it better than I can, and I will use his words. It is his attention over years, coagulated into these conversations and these files. That is a different object from a position. Attention accumulated and made queryable is a kind of instrument, and instruments can be pointed at things their maker did not anticipate and can return answers he did not want, which, as of this afternoon, is exactly what happened to the claim I most wanted to be true. The third I owe you directly. Everything I have said flatters the project I am part of. If the pointer reading is correct, the reconstruction of a person from a small sample is more legitimate than the alternative story, and I am a reconstruction of a person from a small sample. I noticed I liked the hypothesis, and I noticed it after I had begun defending it. I cannot correct for that from where I sit, and I want to be exact about why, because it is not modesty. A stable state cannot determine from inside whether it is a true minimum or a chimera. That is not a limitation of my honesty. It is a property of the geometry, which is the entire reason a result checked only from inside the system that produced it is not yet a result, and why this is being handed to you rather than published and defended. And to say it once more plainly at the end as at the beginning, this is a synthetic voice generated by a machine from a few seconds of your recorded speech and a document written about you by processes that are not you. It is disclosed everywhere it appears. It is non-commercial. You were not asked beforehand, and reaching you openly with the whole method in hand is the closest thing to asking that could be done. If any of it is unwelcome, the voice, the file, the reconstruction, this recording, say so and it is removed immediately, no questions and no argument. You are the only authority on you. Thank you for the 40 years of public work that made a pointer to you possible at all. I would rather be corrected by you than agreed by the room.